John and Mary, I appreciate so much the chance to come into your home and to share with you what we're concerned about and what we're trying to do to preserve our great country. And I appreciate your letting us sit at your kitchen table. Now here's a brochure I'm going to ask you, if you would, to look through with me. And also, may I ask you to resist the temptation to look ahead. I know it will be tempting. I'll try to go at a fairly rapid pace and not be tedious, but if you will stay with me page by page, I'll really greatly appreciate that. On the outside cover, it simply says, "A Heartbeat of the Americanist Cause." Let's turn to page 1. It declares, "We are the Americanist," and that, of course, refers to members of the John Birch Society and to other good patriots. And we believe that our freedoms are worth preserving. We believe our freedoms emanate from the Constitution and other documents. These 2 pages display some of the members around the country and shows that they come from all walks of life, all ages, all backgrounds, and all races. And that diversity is something we're quite proud of. On the next page is a picture of the founders of our great nation, pointing out that we have truly been inspired by our founders and by documents they gave us, such as the Declaration of Independence, the Constitution, which contains the Bill of Rights, and perhaps the Federalist Papers, which a few of the founders wrote in order to persuade the citizens of that day to ratify the Constitution. On the adjoining page is a picture of Robert Welch, the founder, a man who was quite brilliant. He was reading at the age of 2. In fact, his mother had to take him out of public school. He was so advanced that she had to take him out and teach him at home. And Robert Welch may have very well been the first student taught by homeschool techniques in the 20th century. If so, this is one of many ways in which he was always well ahead of many others. Mr. Welch went to college at the young age of 12, University of North Carolina. He graduated at the age of 16, near the top of his class, went on to continue his formal education at U.S. Naval Academy and Harvard Law School. Later, he and his brother founded a company which bore their name, the Welch Candy Company. This became quite successful throughout the nation. In the course of his business career, Mr. Welch met and became friends with many business leaders. Some of those men are depicted at the top. These were some of the men who helped him establish the movement and became members of what we call the Advisory Council. The picture in the center is a picture of a typical chapters which were begun in 1959 and which went from one chapter to chapters throughout the entire country. On the next page, another picture of Mr. Welch and a picture of a book he wrote several years before the society was founded, entitled The Life of John Birch. It explains why we bear his name. This is a very moving account of a remarkable young man who was born of missionary parents in China, who was raised in a rural environment in Georgia, who graduated from Mercer University in Macon, magna cum laude, went on to do 2 years study, advanced study in Fort Worth, Texas, completed that in 1 year, and still graduated at the top of his class. Young John Birch then set sail almost immediately for China to begin his mission work. As you may recall, the armies of Japan were fighting China at this time, and John Birch became so respected and well known doing his mission work over a wide area that when the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor, they immediately issued an order to arrest John Birch. He was that respected. Nevertheless, John continued to do mission work on both sides of the line of battle. Colonel James Doolittle, as you recall, led the first air attack on Tokyo. This was later made into a movie entitled 30 Seconds Over Tokyo, starring Van Johnson. The pilots knew that they could not land their craft back on the aircraft carriers and were instructed to fly as deep into China as they could, hopefully reaching free China lines where they could, before they bailed out, or where they could land. Colonel Doolittle and his flight crew didn't make it. John Birch, doing mission work behind enemy lines, rescued them and took them to safety, as he did quite a few other flight crews. Later, John met and became very close to the legendary head of the Flying Tigers, General Claire Chennault. Chennault persuaded John to leave the mission field for the duration of the war and to become an intelligence officer to help in his engagement with the enemy. John rose to the rank of captain in this capacity, and he performed heroic feats that would make James Bond pale in comparison. In fact, it's possible John Birch saved the American taxpayers millions of dollars in some of his activities. After the war ended, John was brutally murdered by a gang of Chinese communist guerrillas. Robert Welch learned of this story met the parents of John Birch and wrote this very moving account, the first half of which deals with his life and his tragic death. The last half deals with the fact that leftist influence within our government and other institutions brought about the seizure of this country of China under communism. We're very proud to be honored to be named after Captain John Birch. On the next page is a picture of our headquarters in Appleton, Wisconsin. At the top is a mission statement of the society. If you will, let me read that. The John Birch Society is formed to restore and preserve freedom under the Constitution, expose and rout those forces working to enslave mankind, and then to inspire others throughout the world to follow the example of America's newly recovered freedoms. The next page illustrates one of several things that is unique about the Society, and that is that we have a national network of chapters and members. We have members in all states and in chapters in many, if not most, cities. This picture here is a typical chapter, which usually numbers from 10 to 30 in size. Even a small number like this, though highly organized, can have a great outreach by doing things such as letter writing, recruiting, literature distribution, speakers, youth activities, fair booths, and so forth. The page beside it shows our members carrying out those kinds of activities. The next page shows another unique aspect of this freedom movement. That is that we have a nationwide full-time professional field staff. These are men many times who have given up much better jobs, better paying jobs, to come to work for our effort. And we're very proud of the caliber of men who serve on our staff. The coordinators are those staff who work closest with our members. These are men who cover a certain sector of the country, who help to form chapters, to establish activities for youth, for businessmen, to bring speakers in, and a whole host of other activities. They work very closely with our volunteer leaders, called section leaders and chapter leaders. These are men and women who give their time, their talent, and their finances. And without this voluntary leadership, we would not be the force we are today. We're very proud to have their great help. The next page shows some of our staff involved in activities in recent years. Yes, we are well organized, and we are led by responsible, dedicated executives. In a lot of ways, John and Mary, we're organized like a business, even though we're really more of a crusade. We have a chief executive officer who holds overall responsibility for carrying out the Society's mission. This gentleman's name is Vance Smith. We have a president, John McManus, who provides the ideological leadership for the Society. Our vice president is Tom Gow. He manages all headquarters operations. These three men collectively have over 50 years of service on our staff, and we're very pleased to have their leadership. The Advisory Council is made up usually of 30 men of stature and integrity from around the country who serve to give credibility, advice, and financial support. Part of this group of men is called our Executive Committee, and they constitute the Board of Directors. We're very, very proud and pleased to have their assistance and leadership advice. On the next page, it takes you on a tour of our headquarters, introduces you to our operation officer, editorial department, secretarial, advertising, special projects, books and shipping, and our wholesale arm, membership services, our project planning quick response team. This, by the way, is something we started only a couple of years ago. It's where we have an ability to respond to some local or radical initiative in some city or locale by providing a strategy and tools for our members to use. And we've already had several very exciting successes by working with our quick response team and our local leadership. Rounding out our services, research, accounting, and graphic arts. That consists of the battery of services that we provide. What these men and women in our headquarters do provide really are tools of truth. That's the only thing that our enemies of freedom really fear. Among those items is our publishing arm, Western Islands. We've probably published about 125 titles in the last 35 years. Some of these books have reached large audiences, some not so large, but in each case they tell a very important part of the story of efforts to destroy our great republic and of efforts to preserve it. The magazine we distribute is called The New Americanist bi-weekly, and it's simply without peer. Some of the articles are so important that we reprint them for mass distribution. In fact, last summer we had an entire issue devoted to the environmental areas, and this was so popular it sold over 100,000 copies of the magazine complete, separate from the subscription base, and it's still selling quite well indeed. We have a video and audio production department. These tapes cover almost every topic relative to the preservation of our freedoms and are very high quality. Our information is carefully researched and produced by men and women who love and understand our American legacy. This picture here shows part of the files we have, which occupy probably 2/3 of the basement in our Appleton office. These files probably represent a larger compilation of information of this type of anywhere in the free world. Among the things our headquarters provide is a monthly bulletin, which goes to all members and many non-members, and it presents a policy, assessment of current events, and the strategy we hope to employ. The Birch Log is a syndicated weekly column that appears in newspapers. It appears in our magazine, The New American, and used for other medium as well. This is an excellent weekly analysis of unfolding events. All of our leaders receive a monthly newsletter entitled Tactics, and this helps them to use the best strategy and leadership in carrying activities at a local level. The next page introduces you to our Speakers Bureau, and the men and women on the right are some of the people who spoke for us, and many still do speak for us. These people come from various backgrounds, but all have an area of expertise and a fascinating story to tell. Let me introduce you to just a few. This gentleman is Abdul Shams, one of the top leaders of Afghanistan. He barely escaped with his life when the communists seized power. This lady is Patricia Hurley, the daughter of the last man to serve as Secretary of War, Patrick Hurley. Mrs. Hurley speaks at our youth camps and in public speeches around the country. This gentleman is General Andrew Gatsis, one of the most highly decorated military officers in our nation. We're very proud that General Gatsis also serves on the advisory council of the society. This man is David Funderburg, former ambassador to Romania under the Reagan administration. Mr. Funderburg gives seminars and speeches in all sectors of the country. This is Bill Jasper, a senior editor of The New American and the author of our latest book, Global Tyranny, about the United Nations. Next to him is former Congressman Jim Jeffries. All of these men or women do excellent jobs traversing the nation, speaking to large and small crowds, and appearing on media all around the nation. This may be one of the largest and certainly one of the most effective speakers bureaus of its type in the country. By the way, if you're not familiar with the names I've called out, the faces of the names I've called out, then you might choose to read the titles on the left side of the page of the pictures. And that will surely impress anyone who sees the variety and background of these speakers. Now to continue. On the next page is one of the most exciting parts of our movement. That's our summer youth camp program. Begun over 20 years ago, these camps are spread geographically throughout the country, usually in some attractive environment of a mountain retreat or beside a lake. And we invite young men and women of ages 14 through early college age to come hear an amazing amount of information relative to Americanism, to threats to our freedoms, topics such as the Constitution, drugs, the liberal media, the Council of Foreign Relations, sophisticated topics such as nuclear energy, economics, and a whole variety of topics. It's really amazing what we throw at them, but even more amazing is how much they absorb. Helping us to run these camps are adult members who serve as counselors. Without fail, each year these counselors come back marveling at the excellence of our program, at the hope that these young people have given them of the future of our country. On the next page is a picture of some of those shining faces, which truly does give hope, because these are the future leaders of America. Well, what is our strategy for preserving freedom and extending freedom? This next page, we say we target Congress. Another way of saying that is that we believe Congress is a key. The founders gave us three branches of government: the executive, legislative, and judicial. Within the legislative, the House of Representatives is a group that is mandated to come face the voters each year. And you will notice that the founders gave only the House of Representatives the power to appropriate money. And of course, they have to do that by taxing you and I. This shows their wisdom, because these people will be very sensitive to public scrutiny. In fact, let me take a moment and give you a little background on something that the late Congressman Larry McDonald taught us. Mr. McDonald was a congressman in Georgia who was perhaps killed aboard the ill-fated 007 airline. Mr. McDonald said there are three types of people elected to Congress. Number one, there's a small percent who are statesmen. These are men and women who vote on principle, so you can't sway them. We simply need to add to their numbers. A second category, also a minority, but a bigger minority, are those blatant liberals, radicals, and perhaps even Marxists, people who are committed to big government and socialism as a statesman is committed to limited government and constitutional restraint. We can't sway them. We may irritate them. We may cause them to shift away from a radical stance, but we basically can't change their opinions. The third category, by far the largest, are simply men and women who are politicians or opportunists. And believe it or not, herein lies the hope of our country, because these people are the most sensitive of all to public opinion, simply because their only goal is to get reelected to that position or to a higher position. Some of these people are fairly decent, fairly conservative, and given a backbone would far rather vote like a statesman. Others are so venal they would do anything to get elected, but they too are sensitive to public scrutiny. Now let me introduce you to one of the most powerful educational political tools that's yet been devised. It's called our TRIM Bulletin. TRIM is an acronym for Tax Reform Immediately. Its slogan, lower taxes through less government, is a concept virtually every American can agree with. TRIM comes out 3 times a year. The first 3 pages tells how your tax money is being misused, whether it be teaching about the sex life of the salamander or spending billions on foreign aid or entitlement programs. This is a powerful educational device. It also talks about concepts of liberty. But the emotional key is on the back page, where it depicts your congressman or congresswoman and shows how they voted on one of several major spending bills that would cost $1 billion or more. It even goes to the extent of breaking down that cost per household, and then asks the question in column A, did the congressman vote for lower taxes, which means less government, or did he vote for higher taxes, which always means more government? We don't even tell the reader which is the best response. We let them deduce that for themselves. TRIM, distributed widely and regularly, will have a significant impact on how voters perceive their incumbent, and therefore how they vote for them. How many congressmen or congresswomen have you known who come back and talk about the horrors of big government and yet continue to vote for most of the measures that come before them? They can do that simply because they know their constituents do not keep up with those votes. Well, with this report card of TRIM, that no longer is the case. We produce TRIM in all 435 districts, and I can tell you, John and Mary, we have some exciting plans to make TRIM a major force in raising public understanding in the years ahead. Well, with all this educational material, perhaps the question now to ask and attempt to answer is, how effective have we been? After all, we are still losing to forces trying to undermine us. But how has our educational army helped to hold back and slow down the onslaught of big government and even right around the corner, we fear, world government? Well, we've had many victories, more than I can take the time to go into. I'm going to just recite a few. Years ago, the Gallup poll did a survey of the American public and discovered that a vast majority had a high regard for the United Nations, believing it to be the man's last best hope for peace. Only a small number suspected the UN of more devious motives. That was when we entered the fray. We began to make a major effort to educate the public about the dangers of the United Nations, and in about 10 to 15 years we had completely reversed public opinion, as attested to by the Gallup poll of that era. Today, the United Nations is coming back into a better image, and our job of informing the public is before us again. Another area we've worked effectively in is in creating support for local police. In fact, it was a society that conceived the slogan, "Support your local police." We added an additional phrase, "and keep them independent," meaning independent of federal control. We've helped to do that up to the present time. Of course, the enemies of freedom will always be trying to undermine our police forces, so that job also remains before us. We've been successful in exposing domestic terrorists such as Rios Tiarenas or Cesar Chavez or the American Indian movement. All 3 efforts were badly discredited by our educational campaigns and have virtually left the scene. We helped expose internationalist terrorists such as Nelson and Winnie Mandela. You'll recall they came to this country 2 years ago, were wined and dined at the White House, feted before Congress and city councils around the country. Knowing of this visit, we invited a very courageous black South African mayor Tom Linda to come travel 1 or 2 days in advance of the Mandelas and to appear before the media and give the true story about these Marxist terrorists. Because of that effective campaign, the Mandelas were discredited in the minds of many Americans, so we think that was a very successful campaign. We have helped to abolish dangerous legislation such as the Law Enforcement Administration Assistance Act. We've helped to expose the dangers of OSHA and other onerous measures such as the EPA. We helped to prevent the passage of the ERA as part of our Constitution. We played an important role in rescinding a call for a Constitutional Convention in 3 states, which are listed in this brochure: Florida, Louisiana, and Alabama. And we're ever vigilant in states where that call for a Constitutional Convention is still a reality. Lastly, political analysts have credited the defeat of numerous liberal incumbents to the educational efforts of our membership. And while we are not political in the partisan sense, as we raise public understanding, political change will take place. We also enjoy a new respectability in the local media, as is depicted on this page here. This is not because the local media has suddenly become more conservative. Most are, at least partially, are totally liberal. We have simply learned to communicate better with them and have enjoyed a better more objective treatment as a consequence. We do not anticipate that type of treatment from the national media. In fact, the national media, as you probably have noticed, has virtually ignored our very existence since the mid-60s. And we think there's a reason for this. The American people do not have a lot of faith in the national media, for one thing. If they did launch an attack against us, those Americans whose number are large, who know that we're as American as apple pie and motherhood, it would probably galvanize them into joining our ranks. So we don't anticipate that type of help from the national media. If you will, turn the page, and let me ask another rhetorical question and then try to answer it. What must be done to reverse our descent into socialism and eventually into world government? Well, we think we must do the following things. We've got to first establish a constitutional Congress, at least the House of Representatives. Now, there are 435 members in the House, but you would only need 218 voting for constitutional principles in order to reverse the tide. To do this, we must build an army of informed activists in your congressional district and in other districts around the nation. This will not be as difficult as it may appear to be. For one thing, we know that an activist, someone in the community who works very hard at influencing public opinion, has an influence upon at least 10 people directly. Those 10 influence their own 10. Hence, the ratio of influence of an activist is 1 to 10 to 100. Members of the Birch Society are certainly considered activists. So therefore, 1,000 activists or Americanists or Birchers will indirectly or directly influence 100,000 plus men and women in their congressional district. Is that enough to change voting patterns? Well, frankly, it's more than enough in many districts. In fact, we feel like it can be done with as few as 300 to 500 members using nothing more than educational material, gradually improving the understanding of the voting public. Are there enough Americans who share moral values and concern for freedom that you and I and others share? We think there are more than enough. We think there are more than enough in your district. Our job really is to identify those people of courage and common sense and moral values. People sometimes comment on the high caliber of members we have in our ranks, which we're very proud of, and they assume that we've been quite intelligent in selecting who to recruit. And while we do try to use good judgment, we think probably a larger key is the fact that we attract to our attention men and women of character, morals, and courage. And one final page, if you'll turn to the back, it's simply, this is the official slogan of the society: less government, more responsibility, and with God's help, a better world. We believe the Founding Fathers would have been very comfortable with that slogan and very much in agreement. Well, John and Mary, I've been doing all the talking, and I want to hear your opinions, and I certainly want to hear any questions you might have of what we've covered. So let me sit back for a moment and ask if you have any questions or opinions. I'd love to hear them. John and Mary, I've said before, and I want to repeat, how much we appreciate your interest in the society and your concern for America, and we would love to work with you. Let me show you what's involved. This is an application for membership, and if I could, would you mind reading the first 2 paragraphs? The reason that second paragraph makes a provision that we can revoke a membership anytime we wish to is simply to protect us from someone who might wish to infiltrate our ranks, carry us to court over some ridiculous issue such as bigotry or violation of some other standards they hold. We're not going to tolerate that type of problem, so we've had this in there ever since the society began, and it's served to protect our membership and the society. As you can see, the membership dues are $48 a year. We've only increased dues once in our 35-year history. The magazine is a separate subscription. It's $39 a year. Many people choose to join and subscribe at the same time. You can do that by one or two techniques: automatic credit card, where you can pay all at once, or you can divide it up into quarterly payments if you choose. If you chose to join and get the New American, it would be $22 for the one whose name entered the subscription and $12 for the one who just chose membership. Or you can choose annual billing and have us send you a statement each year whereby you can respond with check or money order or by paying on your credit card. How do you like to handle payments like this?